Wintertime always used to be my enemy. So years ago, I was just finishing up a field season in Belize, and I decided to visit a friend up in Canada near Banff. And we decided to climb up one of the mountains. But it was wintertime. So, like the place I'm hiking in right now, give you a little look-see, things were snowy. Now, it was much colder there than it is for me right now, but my body did not keep up. So I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a collagen disorder that affects everyone differently who has it. For me, it's hypermobility, it's constant joint pain, and a whole suite of other issues. The point of it is that wintertime always kind of sucked for me. Whenever I was out in the cold, my body would seize up and it just hurt. And that's what happened to me when I was in Canada. Halfway up the mountain, which is the worst time for stuff to go wrong, my body just kind of gave out. My hips were completely locked in place. Every step of my leg was just kind of destroying me. And I could feel every single muscle fiber in my back screaming with agony. This wasn't me being out of shape and then trying to climb a mountain. I had just finished 6 months of field work in Belize. We were going up and down mountains, hiking on surveys all day long, often with gear. So I knew it wasn't a physical fitness thing, but it was physical. It was my body. Now, compound my winter woes and with seasonal depression and quite frankly, just a variety of family and growing up issues that made my depression really, really bad around the holidays. In undergrad, I remember there was a time where I basically didn't leave the couch for about 2 months unless I had to go to class. In many ways during that time, it was education, and specifically my biology education, that got me through my depression, because I had to work really hard to find something that would get me up and out of the bed, especially when the weather was awful outside. So, growing up, it was in Texas, central Texas, around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And if you're from there, oh man, you know the winters suck. You know how bad those winters are, man. You don't really get snow, you just get sleet and ice and wind and wet. And I remember that same Canadian friend who I visited. They visited me in Texas. And they said it was one of the coldest places they've ever felt because of just how awful and like bone-chilling the winters are there. So now, I recently moved to California, to North Carolina from California, right? Basically, where I've lived in my adult life has been Texas, Belize, and San Diego. So really 3 regions that don't have seasons. Texas technically has seasons, but if you count 2 weeks of fall leading into like awful winter. Of course, Belize has a wet, dry season, and San Diego is that beautiful Mediterranean climate. So living now in North Carolina, I got to experience a real fall for the first time in my life. And to me, this is the first time living somewhere that actually feels like winter. Now, these conditions are not typical. I've been told that this amount of snow is not typical for the region in North Carolina that I am in, and that is a-okay. It still felt like winter to me, seeing the gradual change of the colors during the fall. I was out building trails in very far east Tennessee during the fall time. And it really made me fall in love with these natural systems all over again. Okay, I'm a bit farther away from the road now, but like, look at that. That's ice. The pond, the lake, is frozen. This is like mind-blowing to me, because when I was learning about nature, learning about the natural systems, I wasn't indoctrinated at a young age, right? I grew up in a pet store, and it wasn't until I had my formal biological training in college that I really fell in love with this field. But when I was learning about it, you learn about these systems, forest succession, you learn about how organisms change with the seasonal patterns. You learn about hibernation, you learn about the spring emergence, right? And I did get a lot of that in Texas. I don't want to say I never did, but a lot of the most stereotypical things we learn about natural ecosystems and how they change involves something that to me felt like this, right? Like a long period of the fall colors coming in, showing a diversity of trees, all of a sudden punctuated by this beautiful winter landscape. And I'm realizing that now I'm living here. This isn't me visiting an area that has winter time. I'm living in an area with winter time. I mean, Jesus Christ, here, look. So for me, if you know my journey at all, you know that I moved to California for grad school and started learning about the ecosystems there. I got to finally live in a desert, which was fascinating. Our Mediterranean desert. I was in San Diego. But I realized it was nature that I felt just disconnected from. There was something about Southern California. I mean, it's a different world. It really is. Not just politically or culturally or whatever, but environmentally, wildly different than what I'm used to. So coming here in North Carolina, it was a choice. I chose to move here largely for the biodiversity, right? I largely chose to move here because of the nature. And I'll be honest, when we were looking for places to live, one thing I did look for was a place that didn't really snow that often and did not get that much lower below 30 degrees. This is abnormal. We're having multiple winter storms due in part to climate change, and the temperatures are much lower than you'd expect. But if you asked me, not even gonna lie, 3 months ago, if I would be out hiking when there is snow out, hell no. My body can't take it. So being able to hike right now and my body feels fine is kind of weird. Now, looping back to the Ehlers-Danlos, connecting all the different ADHD threads together, it's something that my, oh gosh, I forget what they're called. She's a doctor, she's a specialist, she deals with joints, rheumatologist. My rheumatologist back in San Diego said that my condition is not going to get worse necessarily. Rather, it's more like as my body naturally degrades with age, just like we all do, I'm more susceptible to injuries, more susceptible to other issues. And in fact, my body's actually gotten better with age. If you look at me now compared to 18-year-old me, 18-year-old me was just wildly in pain. And I realized that's something I carried with me for so long. That Ehlers-Danlos, that hypermobility, that pain that I have was a part that made me not experience ecosystems like the one I'm in right now. Time periods like the one I'm in right now. It made me basically slot out a quarter of the year and said, this is the time when you, the biologist, can't go outside because your body doesn't agree with it. Now, funnily enough, I thought moving to San Diego and being in the Mediterranean climate would help me out. Turns out my body likes the humidity. It just turns out I need that humidity. Every time I go down to Belize for field work, I thought I felt great. And it was because of that. So I'm rambling a little bit. That happens in stories. And if you're watching to this far in, hey, really appreciate it. What I'm trying to do going forward, we've talked about the past, talked about the present, and we've talked about the future. I'm trying to make this whole content creator / biologist thing work. And a big part of that was the move, right? I chose a place with lower cost of living with biodiversity that I deeply cherish, particularly salamander biodiversity. But I'm realizing I might have set myself up for an even more amazing experience because The natural systems that I have been fortunate enough to experience here, only 6 months. The changing of this landscape. I've hiked this trail now at least a dozen times in the last 3 months. And being able to see it change week after week, day after day, time after time. That's what I love about nature. Because it's a story. It's a story of change. It's a story of cycles. And it's a story that I think a lot of people miss out on.